Make that big boss less special. It ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level. Second level.
Hello, Internet, and welcome back, or welcome to, if you're new, to Indie Please Add Details, Episode 3. My name's Keegan, I'm one half Low 2 Gamers, hanging out with Tom, as the hand is normal, the other half Low 2 Gamers. How you doing today, Tom?
I'm grand.
It sounds weird, I'm giving you the hand.
Yeah.
You want the
well,
hand?
I mean, you give me the finger.
Yeah, well, I give you the index finger.
That's true.
For those of you who don't know, Indies Please Add Details is our weekly dip into the world of indie games and indie developers, where we discuss the news and our indie excursions throughout the week. We top it all off with a topic of discussion at the end of it, which is always fun to do. You can listen to us on your favorite podcast services. That's Apple Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you want to find us. Additionally, there's gameplay footage on level2gamers.com. I don't think I put it up last week. I think I completely just brain farted on that one.
Did you?
So yeah, I think I just completely forgot. I meant to. If I might have. We'll find out. Or if you want to continue the discussion offline or online after the video, you can follow us on Twitter at level2gamersstl or Discord. Links in the description down below. That's kind of been picking up recently for us. So
yeah.
Without further ado, let's jump into detail number 1. Indie, please add details.
Indie.
Detail number 1, Tom. There's a little game that we've talked about, I feel like, every week since this thing started. So 3 episodes in a row. PUBG. PUBG is officially the largest game on Steam. It beat Dota 2. And I don't know if you know, but Dota 2 is kind of a big game.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact numbers. I don't have the article pulled up, but I want to say it's over 780,000 people playing at one time.
It's incredible.
Some games don't even sell that.
Yeah.
So with that being said, PUBG, independent game. We've talked about it being published by Microsoft on Xbox. I assume they're publishing it. I published themselves on Steam, because you don't really need a publisher for Steam.
I think they've been on Steam for a hot second, but I don't know if they had a publisher.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think if it's on Steam, you don't really need a publisher. Yeah. And then Sony, we're still waiting to hear if there's anything, and I doubt it's coming to the Switch. That would be amazing, but I don't think it'll happen. So that brings the discussion. Normally we talk about the news. This is a bit of news that brought a question to me. At one point, is an indie game no longer an indie game? Is it size of team? Is it size of game, number of players, whatever it may be? So I'm going to give you a couple examples that came to mind when I thought of indie games that I think transcend what an indie game by definition is. So obviously, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds.
Yeah.
That's the big one. Microsoft's publishing it on Xbox, like I said. The other one I came up with was Cuphead. That's another Microsoft published, funded, / given resources game.
I still see that as an indie, even though that Microsoft picked it up.
That's true. We'll see. We'll have a discussion here. You have EA Plays, which did Unravel last year.
Yeah.
And they're doing Fe or Fae. I think it's Fae.
Fae.
This year, FE is coming out. And then on Sony, you had the big No Man's Sky, which was a big flop, but it built the hype for that game, and the game exploded. That game sold way more than it should have if it didn't have the hype behind it.
Way more returns.
And then recently, on all platforms, nobody published this that I'm aware of on their platform, Sonic Mania, which is a AAA IP, but is made by a bunch of fans. So is that considered an indie game? So that being said, what is your definition of what an indie developer / indie game is?
My definition of an indie developer / indie game is a video game that was made by a small team of independent developers, either publishing under a self-made banner or maybe linking up with a smaller end publisher,
so like a Team 17 or something like that.
Yeah.
Who did the Escape? They did this. They did Escapist.
No, Digital Revolver, whatever.
Digital Devolver.
There you go, Devolver. Someone like that, like not like a powerhouse like Activision or EA or no one that holds a keynote speech at E3.
E3. So with your definition, then PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds is out. Cuphead is out, but you said it's not out, even though that's being published by Microsoft.
I said it's an indie game.
That's what I'm saying. But by your definition, if it's being published by Microsoft, then it is no longer
everything except for that part is under it. So that's where the question comes in, isn't it? Because it was developed by a tiny team. That's why it's taken so long to come out. It has indie aesthetics about the entire game. There's definitely, I mean, it's very unique in style, but
it's a really cool style.
It's awesome style. But it's it was put together by a small team of people, and literally it's just at the tail end that it's been snatched up by Xbox as an exclusive. Now I don't see them necessarily putting more than a little tiny bit of money and just saying,
I'm sure they
hey,
give. I'm
can
sure
we
they.
have an
Well,
exclusive?
they've given marketing money. They had to have.
Right.
Kind of like Sony. That's how I feel like No Man's Sky.
Right.
So
But then did they need it? You know what I mean? Because they were doing pretty hot when they were an indie developer. They didn't need
But
Microsoft.
when did the hype train start? Did it started at E3 when they were on the stage? It didn't start. So those of you
It's
who
been for a hot second though, and it wasn't a Microsoft exclusive then when they announced it. I don't think
it
so.
was.
It was.
It was announced on the stage as an exclusive.
Are you sure?
Yes. In E3 2015.
I'm lucky if I can remember. What
E3
happened.
2015, I think
yesterday.
it was an exclusive.
Fair enough.
On Microsoft because that's why they showed
I
it.
feel like it started as mobile, but I might be wrong.
So, what I was going to say is, with the hype train, when does the hype train start? Because a lot of times, if you guys don't know kind of the way E3 works, is most people, the average Joe, I would say, if they have any sort of interest, they will just watch the keynotes before E3. E3 is technically the week after the keynotes. So you have
kickoff E3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's getting earlier and earlier every year. But you have well, now you have Bethesda, Microsoft, Sony, Ubisoft, EA with EA Plays. Is that it? Am I missing? And then there's a PC one, which I don't really watch because
PC gaming, yeah.
yeah,
That's the
I
only
think that's
other
it. And then during the convention is
No.
Nintendo. I'm missing,
Yeah, I was
I'm
gonna
like
say,
I'm missing
I knew we missed
one.
Yeah.
Nintendo, but they do Treehouse now, so it's not really
Yeah.
but it does showcase games. But then me, as somebody who loves indie games, what I tend to do is like I'll watch those keynotes and you get the big flashy new awesome mega games, or you'll have a developer get spotlighted. But then I'll go in and watch IGN's coverage or GameStop's coverage of E3, and hopefully one day it'll be Level 2's coverage of E3, of seeing these games that are like the best games that you didn't see on stage or stuff like that. Because there was recently with Gamescom, I think I sent you the link to it, where it's like the best games that you didn't hear of at Gamescom or something like that. Right. And it was a bunch of indie games that I was like, oh, this is cool. So normally what happens is it's that second wave of like people who are more into games or looking for it. Obviously the casual gamer will just do AAA and be happy with it.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do as well with the fact that they just have a time limit on their presentation. So if you think about a company the size of Sony, like you can't fit what they've been doing in the entire year and going forward for the next 2 years into a 2-hour broadcast on TV. So, you know, those indie developers maybe don't have the option to shine because there's just too much other stuff going on and they have to keep under the time limit. But it is nice that they do cover it afterwards, like the smaller indie media or you know even double A media whatever can cover it as well. So
I mean the big again the question is, where does an indie game stop becoming an indie game? And to me, my definition is an independent game is somebody who is a relatively smaller team in numbers. You can argue numbers, so on and so forth.
Under
but
20, I would say. It
all depends on, I think, the size and scope of the game. Because you have an independently published game that has 50 people on a team. You have to get funding for it, but you could. That's where Kickstarter comes in. That's where these bigger projects come in.
Yeah.
So you have to keep that in mind.
If you have a 50-person team, I think that's crossing the line to double
A. But so my definition is,
I would never deny you your definition.
Double A's are independent games. My definition is an independent game is published by somebody who is not a key holder to a console, or somebody who does not have exclusivity to a console.
See, I'm torn about that. It's not that I disagree necessarily. It's just that, like, even though my own definition when I said it, as far as like having a small publisher or whatever, like I can't look at a game like Cuphead and not see it as an indie title. Just because they had Microsoft help them at the end. I can't see Minecraft as not an indie game. I know that sounds stupid because Minecraft's like one of the most popular games.
It is the most popular game in the world.
It's like the indie game made by one fucking dude, and it just took off to the point where the fandom took over. So, I mean, I guess it's almost the same as like bands or whatever, where you say, you know, when you get signed to a label, is that you selling out, but you know, or you know, not being underground anymore or whatever the correct term is.
And I feel like gaming's a little bit trickier because at least with like record labels, there's like 5 major ones that you're like, I'm going to get on RCA. Well, I don't think RCA is like one anymore, but I'll get on Time Warner or whatever it may be. Not Time Warner. Sony Music. That's a good example. I was like, Time Warner's TV. Warner Brothers Entertainment. So I think a lot of it comes down to, so for me, like I said, it comes down to if it's not a key holder. So if Microsoft says we're putting money into this game, we're putting resources into the game, that is no longer an independent game because they have a giant corporation behind them. If Activision comes out and says we're putting money into this game, we're putting resources in this game, that's no longer an independent game.
What if it's almost at the end though?
It doesn't matter. They're putting resources in the game to sell it.
Putting it back to the the band like allegory. So let's say you have a band and they make the entire album in their garage with like raw rough recording, like it's not been studio, like the studio had nothing to do with
well, 9 times out of 10 they'll make them re-record it, but I'll skip that for now.
Let's just pretend that they didn't, right?
Yes.
And the label just said, we really like this album, we think it's great, we want to put it out. We'll do the advertising, get you a tour. That record still does not become a mainstream. Like,
I think it does, because at that point you're pushing it out marketing wise to a wider audience.
How it was made
doesn't matter. Made does not matter. It's publisher that matters.
But it was made
all game studios are independent then. Every single game studio, unless it's owned by Microsoft, unless it's Microsoft Studios or Sony Studios, are all independent.
What do you mean?
So
explain your
let's
argument.
take a game. Let's take Star Wars Battlefront, EA. EA is an independent publisher from Sony and Microsoft.
I still don't see EA as independent, though.
Why not?
I think it's almost the same way that you determine whether an independent developer is independent or not. You have to do it based on the size, the manpower, the track record,
and that's where Microsoft or Sony coming in and giving them the size, the manpower, the track record of saying, hey, we're putting our stamp of approval on this game. We think it's going to be good. We're going to give you the resources to shout it out to 1 million people versus 30,000.
At what point does indie just become third party though? Because like EA and Bethesda are third-party studios. They're not necessarily indie studios because of the size and scale of their teams and their game and
that's what I'm saying. So they've built themselves up, though.
Right.
So if
where do you go from indie to third-party to because you're like confusing like when you said having a key to the console, that's just a first party. The first party and the third party are still bigger than indie. So I would still call like Devolver a third party studio as much as I would call EA a third party studio, but there's obviously a difference in size and scope of those two things. So if you're
I'm trying to think of
all right, keep thinking.
Waiting to hear your.
But like I'm saying, like the independent game itself, if it's made by a few people with few resources, that's independent, published independently, right? And the publisher, if they a self-made publisher, they don't have anyone paying their bills. If they're just like they put themselves together the same way as the independent developer studio put themselves together, then that. To me,
and that's what EA did back in the day. So just because EA and Activision started back in the 80s, they started as independents and they grew up there. Same thing with any developer.
Ignoring between an indie game, what's the barrier for an independent publisher?
I think
to
after
a third party
my personal opinion when it comes to developer or publisher, it's after 3 games. You have 2 games to succeed or fail, because usually your first. If it's a successful, semi-successful, depending on how you classify that, after 3 games, if you have not had a hit, I think you're out of the business.
So that boils down to money.
That boils down to you have to sustain yourself. It's a business,
right? I'm just saying. So you're saying the publisher with the most money becomes third party over a publisher with less money,
or has the track record, the catalog to prove that it's not it's not a one-hit wonder.
Yeah,
I mean that's why the Escapists.
There's definitely a fine line, though, isn't there?
Oh, I'm not arguing that at all. Yeah. I just think when it comes to indie games, by definition, I still think PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is technically indie developed. But what I'm saying is the marketing makes it to where if they didn't go on Microsoft stage, if Cuphead didn't go on Microsoft stage, they're not going to sell nearly the same amount as they did. That's like if we get a feature on IGN. If we get featured on IGN for something, that makes us more well known. Okay, at some point our numbers are going to go up because of that. Does that mean we're no longer independent media?
Well,
like that's the argument we're saying.
Yeah,
that's the argument we're making
for
now.
Everything, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Like there's, I think it's easier to draw on other entertainment formats, because like with a band that sells a record that makes millions of charts, you can say, okay, that is no longer an indie record. That has now become a popular record. Therefore, they are.
Oh, bands. It's easy. It's signed or unsigned.
Well, that's
the way it works. Yeah. Like developers, like the problem, like
it's signed by who? Because you could be signed by my friends back home in a garage someplace, and you're still not going to be technically like big. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think that's the other issue then with this is publishers. You have everything from the size of.
What about Critical Acclaim? Critical Acclaim, I think, has a say in it too, because like when you have a studio,
but sales matter more than Critical Acclaim.
Yeah, for sure. But then
if
usually
you don't sell
the two coincide. Most
not
of the time.
always.
Not always.
Not always. There's been a few times, sadly.
But for a lot of games that have Critical Acclaim, even if they don't necessarily have the biggest bankroll, like let's say Braid, right? So Braid, when that came out, Critical Acclaim, left, right, and center, definitely wasn't really picked up heavily by any of the major guys. Like they would hype it a little bit as part of our indie darlings, but
they're on the Xbox Live spot or arcade spotlight or the hell they called it back in the day.
Right, and
Xbox
then Jonathan
Summer
Blow
Arcade.
goes and makes The Witness, right? Which is still technically indie made, but
Yes.
then you look at it and play it, and you would put it more in the AA category.
So you know why that is, though, right? Why he's still considered an indie is because he did not take any money from Microsoft, Sony, or Nintendo.
Who
He got
did he take money from?
his old game.
So he just self-financed everything?
Yeah, he got
Wasn't
he
Witness,
literally
what was The Witness put out by
himself,
Really?
by his company.
Didn't know that.
Well, I don't know technically who the publisher was, but it was not Sony or Microsoft. I mean, I can look it up real quick if we want to, but
Yeah, it has to be some third-party
I
publisher.
mean, we can. I'll look while we fill
look
the air
it up,
here. But no, the big thing I think with that is like they were featured in the indie section of the games, but they weren't getting Microsoft's or Sony's money. I think that's the big thing right here is when you start investing in a thing, like becomes more second party at that point than it does first party.
But you think about the amount of things that Sony is allowing into the store that are Sony exclusive, right? So you have, let's say, smaller teams that make these smaller games, and Sony maybe doesn't give them injection of cash. Sony likes the finished product, much like the Garage record. They like the finished product as is, and they just want to put
Publisher
it out.
was Thekla Inc. So
The fuck that is. But, you know...
they did Firewatch, Braid, and Inside.
So, yeah, so that's what... I mean, those are 4 critically acclaimed games. Does that make Thekla third party, or does it make
I think it
still
does.
an
It makes a
indie
third party
publisher?
puzzler. I think it does at this point because it's made enough. I'm trying to look at other things
Because that's a lot of money.
This is Jonathan Blow's company.
Oh, he put out
He is the
Firewatch?
director. He's the producer, designer, and programmer.
Wow.
So
He didn't do all of that work on Firewatch or...
no, there's other people,
Inside, though.
programmers as well, but he's
He's just like the head honcho, dude.
yeah. It's his publishing company.
Interesting. Yeah,
So
so
they've
that's
done-
interesting because again, that kind of is, you know, where is the line? It's a line that combines things like critical acclaim, combines things like money, combines things like the size of the studio, the history of the studio. There's so many nuances to it. I don't think it's possible to pinpoint an exact moment that an indie game becomes not an indie game anymore. Because you may have a game that's been worked on for like 10 years and it's still, like when Sony puts it in the PSN store, it's under the indie section because it's
independent.
still
Because
made
they
by
got no
3
cash
people.
from somebody. I think that's what it comes down to: is where's the money come from for the game?
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. If it's independent, or
But
not.
if it's finished, then
But
it's
they're
already been indie developed, as you said.
then they're doing the marketing push. That's so my argument at that is same thing with the band.
Marketing shouldn't un-indie a game, though.
It does because it gives a wider audience. So if you come in and we'll use your musician analogy because it works really well with the entertainment mediums. If you come in and you have a band that plays here in St. Louis at the Firebird, play for 200 people. Record executive comes in and says, "Hey, we like your album. We're not going to make you re-record it," which again I feel like they would, but we're not going to make you do that. We're going to give you marketing assets to make music videos, to advertise your album on social media, on traditional platforms, give you access to people you don't have access to normally, the IGNs in the video game world, the alternative press in the music world. That is a whole different ballgame than Happy Badger Studio that's trying to go to Gamescom to make connections to somebody and say, play my game.
Yeah.
So that's where I think the line is drawn, is at that point you're getting access to stuff that you would not normally have as a person in their basement
Do you think
or somebody in their bedroom.
a good finite way to put a nail on it would be to say it's when you have to stop asking people to play your game?
No, because I think people always ask to play their game. I mean, it's just...
But I think there's a point where like people want to play it without having to ask. Like you said, like that's a perfect analogy. Like Happy Badger or Volcano Bean or whatever, they're at these events, they're out there with their games, and they're saying, please play our game, please test it, please give us feedback. But someone like Jonathan Blow's studio is not necessarily going to be at a small local convention and saying, play my game, play my game.
Yeah.
Because it's all like all of the gameplay footage is going to go out. IGN's going to be asking them to do stuff
Getting
on
exclusive,
it. So I
the
think
IGN
once
first.
the point where you have to stop asking, I think, is at least a good kind of turnover point where you start going, okay, maybe this is getting a bit bigger now. Even for us, like we're at a point now where even though we do ask a lot for indie games and stuff, we in our email are getting people saying, hey, please play our game. So we know we're getting to a point where
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's really nice where people are actually like, okay, these two are doing something a little bit bigger than your average YouTuber, so how can I get some exposure for my game because of that? Which is it's nice, like you said. But, I mean, the bigger the game that we get, the more we're going to feel like we're a part of that.
Yeah, and the other thing too is on that aspect for us personally. This is going to be a little side tangent here. Is I think we personally love the super small developers like the Volcano Beans, the Happy my personal opinion is like the 10 under people or the single people like that. To me,
people that make it by themselves.
That's the most amazing thing. There's like, holy shit, how the fuck did you do that? So I think we like that. But when we do get bigger games, I'm trying to think when we got recently, Theseus ended up being a bigger game. Yeah. We had Conan Exiles, bigger game, but for us, that's one of those things where it's just like, it's a bigger game, and it helps us, and I think that's kind of where the portal is into the next realm. So if Ubisoft comes to us and says, hey, we're going to give you Assassin's Creed, was it Origins? I think it's the new one. I don't follow Assassin's Creed at all. But they said, to me, that would be the delineation of, okay, you have made it. You are no longer an unknown in this industry.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I think that's a good dividing point, is like when you have to stop asking and people just start asking you.
Yeah, what do you guys think? I'd love to normally we do news, but I feel like that was a good a good topic, because like I said, the fact that PlayerUnknown's Battleground, it's the
PlayerUnknown's
Battleground, because it's PlayerUnknown's is the person.
Yes.
Yeah. The fact that is the #1 game on Steam right now, and the fact that nobody's published it outside of them, and the fact that just also shows the power of the online community, that game exploded. But it's really, really cool to see these games that have the ability. We always talk about the barrier before. You had to go to a publisher, print your game, and then it's a lot easier. It was more like the music thing back in the day. Now the digital's the thing. It's like, holy hell. Like, you don't even have to, like itch.io. You can put anything up there, which is really cool. So, again, I'd love to know your guys' opinions on that. I think we came to a good consensus of like when...
That's
like
about as amicable as we've ever been for an argument, I think.
We argued and then we came together. It's very weird.
It does happen from time to time.
So let's go on to detail number 2, where we do spotlight some of these indie games, some of these smaller games that we think you should check out.
Let's do it too.
And the first one is going to be my game.
Sure.
And I picked this up on a sale. I think it was like $2.50 or $3 or something.
It was on the cheap side.
On the flash
sale.
Yeah. Normally $10. It is Four-Sided Fantasy, and I'm going to read the little blurb here to make sure I don't screw it up, because it's really well written.
Mine, so while you're reading, I'm going to find my blurb.
Four-Sided Fantasy is a wordless, seamless experience where you use the screen to wrap and solve puzzles in a way you never thought before. Remember Pac-Man and how you can go off one side of the screen and wrap around to the other? In Four-Sided Fantasy, the player has the ability to toggle the screen wrap on and off at any time. Each new season of the game brings a new twist to the screen wrap. Just as you think you've mastered the screen wrap mechanic, the world would change, and its rules present a new way for you to look at its confines of your screen.
Interesting.
Features. I'm just going to read this again, then I'll give my personal take on here. Unique, mind-bending, the ability to revitalize a long neglected aspect of games. Beautiful, crisp art style, inspired by the illustrations of John Menzel. There's no N. Menzel. Mesmerizing music composed by the one and only MJ Quiggles Quigley. Haunting sounds by Ian Shores. Seamless movement from level to level using filmic transitions. So,
all good things.
I played this game. The gameplay up on you'll see it behind us. We're crossing mics here because I moved it.
Don't cross this.
Don't cross the mics. So you'll see the gameplay behind us, but if you want to do it with the audio, it'll be up on our channel. But this game, I picked it because of the art style, and I've had my eye on this game for a while. It's $9 or $10 full price. Came out Q3 2016 on both PC and Steam, as well as I know it's on PS4. I'm not sure about Xbox. I'm going to say it probably is. I didn't look, to be honest. And it's a puzzle platformer, like in the truest sense of what a puzzle platformer is. And as you know, I love my puzzle games. I love my platforming games. Put them together, and what do you got? A Keegan game.
It does have some good aesthetics to it.
Yes, it's got a really cool art style. But what's the mechanic, like they're talking about, is on the PS4, you hold the right trigger and it freezes the screen, and there's like a little white fuzzy on the side to delineate when you've done it. And that way you
can you move when you've frozen the screen?
Yes. Okay. So you hold it, and some of the puzzles, like say you're down here, there's a roof above you, and then there's a floor on top of that roof. And so there's a gap at the top of the screen. If I go low enough, I can jump down, or if I'm high enough, I can jump down into a hole and land on the top of the screen. Or if I jump from the left, I'll land up on the right and go back and forth that way, which seems really simple, and it is at the beginning. And then you realize how much they could do with this. So they do things like there's a couple sections. So it starts off, the first puzzle you do is to show you the mechanic. You get to the edge, there's a cliff. Well, you can't make that jump. You'll die. It reminds me of Mario. It's like when you have the Goomba at the beginning. If you hit the Goomba, you're going to die. So what do? You learn to jump on the Goomba.
Right.
So you fall in the hole. What do? Oh, yeah, I can actually hold R2 and go back this way and end up on the other side of that gap.
Yeah.
And keep going into the level. As you progress and go further and further along, one of the things they have is, I would love to know if there's like a story to it. I don't think there really is. But the one part where I started going, oh shit, we've taken it up a little bit, is there's like white static that you used to have on TVs back in the day, and I'm sure you still do if you have cable that doesn't work. And if you hit it, you die. So what you have to do is you have to level the top of the screen low enough that you don't hit it when you fall through. So again, if you're either jumping from the bottom to the top, you have to make sure you have the top of the screen frozen at the right spot to go through. Later on, they have trampoline style things.
So does the screen move around for you?
You're always centered on the screen. You're always centered, and it's literally the outline of your screen.
Gotcha.
So it's your TV screen size. So one of the things they had later on, which is actually where I got stuck for a little bit, was they have trampolines. And you can bounce up, and obviously you can't just like bounce this way and bounce that way because you can't reach it. So what you have to do is you have to bounce, hold R2, fall down to the top, find a platform, bounce, and go up, and things like that. Like,
well, juggling.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot going on, and I had a lot of those moments where like some of the puzzles, you're like, okay, I know this right away what I need to do, and some of them you stand there and you're like, I know I can do what I need to do, but how do I do it? Like, I have the tools here.
Definitely is complicated then. At least
some of
makes
them
you
are.
Sit and think
yes.
for a minute.
Yeah, and you'll try different things. Like, that didn't work. Let me try something else. And it's a good sign of a puzzle game where I didn't feel there's a couple times I felt cheated because it was like that much off, but that's not the game's fault. That's just one of those things where it happens.
It wasn't anything that you felt was like the game being...
Yeah, the game wasn't unfair on it. So there's a lot of cool things. It's literally just run and gun. There's no bosses, no nothing. It's just jumping, platforming, and puzzling.
So where does the name Four-Sided Fantasy come from? Just because you have
It's four sides. You can jump on all four sides.
Gotcha.
And it's really, really, really cool. There's two characters. You play as both a male and female, and when you jump, you switch the character. So what's really fun sometimes, because I would get bored, is I would just switch characters because I could. So you'd be running along, you hold R2 and you switch, and you're like, oh, I'm a female now.
You rebel.
Yeah, it's because I could. I really can't wait to see what the end of this game is and kind of see where it goes, because Line Light was another one I enjoyed, and I enjoyed it because it was... I don't like puzzle games that feel super hard from the get-go, or they just throw a mechanic at you that didn't make any sense in the game at that point going forward. Line Light was really good because it built upon itself. Same thing with this. It's like, okay, you can do this. Oh, now you can go up and down on platforms.
Is it
now
something, though, that if you didn't play it for 3 weeks, you'd forget what all of the mechanics were?
No.
I hate that.
Nope.
Okay.
I feel like they're simple enough.
Okay.
When you get it, you have that moment of like, that makes total sense type thing. It's not anything that's like game specific of like, I need to jump on this wall to jump on that wall to jump on that wall. Okay, stop at the screen. The first thing, when I was solving the puzzle, I'd stop at the screen. You would look and say, okay, where do I need to go? What's my goal? Okay, my goal is this little alcove up here. How do I get up there? I can't just jump up because I can't jump high enough. Is there any wall or platform I can land on before that? Okay, there's the wall and platform. How do I need to line my screen to hit on that platform to be able to get up to make the next jump?
Gotcha.
So things like that. So it's really, 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 in my opinion, well done. For $10, it's a steal. I said I got it for $2.50, even more of a steal on the flash sale. But I really would recommend checking it out. It's made by Ludo Games, or Ludo Land Games, I should say. Ludo Land.
Ludo is the name of the
band.
Bear creature in Labyrinth.
Is it?
Ludo.
They're also a band. But I seriously, if you're a fan of puzzle platformers, I'd say pick this up. I know we do a lot of these where it's like, hey,
there's a lot of
very
them,
much game. There's a lot of them, but this one, and that's the thing is like, there's so many of them that a lot of times I will like. There's plenty of games that I have played that you guys will never hear about because I'm like, that game's garbage, and unless it's to the point where it's like super garbage, I will never talk about it because just like we don't talk about meh games a lot. We talk about the really good and really bad games. They're not the ones
we're
in the
trying
middle.
to dig the diamonds out of the dirt, aren't we?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole point of the channel. But of course, you know, if there's warnings to be had for things that were hyped up and then didn't live up to it, then that has to come into play too.
So there, like I said, I would highly recommend Four-Sided Fantasy. A lot of fun. I enjoyed my time in it. I will go hop back into it, and it's one of those games that like you can either play because there's no. I don't believe there's any save states. I could be wrong. I didn't notice any. So you could hop in for 20 minutes or you can hop in for 4 hours.
Do we know how long the total game is?
I would guess, just based on price and what how the puzzles have progressed so far, probably 4 hours.
Okay.
3-4 hours. I don't know for sure, but that's my guess based on, again, progression of what I've done and where I'm at. So they do the 4 seasons, and I've gone through 2 seasons so far in about 2-ish, hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah.
So that would make sense.
Yep.
So
like it.
that's my detail. That's my spotlight on this lovely game. Four-Sided Fantasy. $10, PC, PS4, I believe Xbox. I can double check that for you, or you can look it up for yourself.
All right.
What do you got?
Mine is a really exciting game that we initially asked for a key for and were denied, which may be a little bit sad.
Because we're smalls.
We're smalls. But it was...
we're still independent.
Yeah, we're indie media. We're not quite there yet. But I bought it anyway because I really wanted to play it. So, you know, it wasn't a big deal. So this game is called Observer. And Observer is really interesting because it's the team that made Layers of Fear. And you remember Layers of Fear, right?
Yes.
Hello. Yes. Layers of Fear
that was one of those games that, again, that the internet kind of blew up a little bit when it first came out. You don't follow the PC gaming online YouTube world as much as I do, but that was one that like definitely got ahead.
Everyone streamed it.
It was the Markiplier horror game that everybody jumped on board and was like, let's go.
So Layers of Fear, good reception, but also, you know, going back to the indie thing, very indie inspired. Like there was nothing about it really that you felt like it was anywhere near a AAA. It was like the whole time you're going through the house, you're kind of thinking,
you expect a little bit of jank.
Yeah, little jank.
Which is not a bad, I'm not saying that negatively, but it's...
No, it was a good game. But taking it up a notch is Observer, which is basically as close as you can get to playing Blade Runner in a video game. It has a lot of elements of things like Deus Ex in terms of augmented humans that have, you know, like robot arms or eyes or whatever else. Fun side fact, by the way, I was planning on writing a book about augmented humans one time. It's an idea I've had in my trademarked. It's an idea I've had in my head for a while about writing a book about augmented humans that get hacked and then they don't have control of those parts anymore on their body. But I'm assuming it's not very original.
I'm sure it sounds like it's been done
at the time. It felt genius. So here's a little bit about the game. What would you do if your fears were hacked? Observer is a cyberpunk horror game from Bloober Team, which is a great name. The creators of Layers of Fear.
Bloober?
Bloober.
Like 2 B's?
BLOOBER.
Okay, they said blooper first.
Discover a dark cyberpunk world beset by plagues, war, and squalor. Play as the new frontline in a neural police as you hack into a jagged minds of the insane. Observe and report. You are Dan Lazarski, an elite neural detective known as an Observer, and part of the corporate-funded police unit whose purpose is to hack and invade suspects' minds. In this future, anything you think, feel, or remember can be used against you in a court of law. Dark dystopia. The year is 2084. If you were somehow survived the nanophage, which is where like a bunch of robots got tore up, odds are you were killed in the war. Those who live have turned into drugs, VR, neural implants, anything to distract themselves from the new reality, but they can't hide from you. Interactive insanity. As you hack into the unstable minds of criminals and victims to look for clues, you will relive their darkest fears, forcing you to question your own reality and your sanity. A new horror from the creators of Layers of Fear, the largest and most frightening world yet from Bloober Team. Lose yourself and your sanity in the dark dystopia that is 2084. Observer is a horror experience meant for mature audiences. What you see will disturb you.
So is it a walking sim?
No.
How does it play? What's the actual gameplay?
So...
based on that, I picture some sort of walking sim like Layers of Fear.
It's definitely a little bit more than a walking sim. Like I totally get where you would get that vibe from, and a lot of it is walking around, but there's so much more to it because it's almost more like a Sherlock Holmes game than a walking simulator because you are actually a detective and you do actually have to solve problems. So
solve puzzles.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, when you go into this like for the beginning part of the game anyway, which is I'm kind of like 3-4 hours in. You go into this apartment complex to research this horrible thing that happened. And while you're there, the apartment complex gets shut down, and you can talk to the residents like through video walls on their doors. Some of them will answer, some of them won't. You can really go anywhere you want to as long as it's open. But you're a detective, so your job is to just like go to the crime scene, and then when you're in there, you have to analyze things like the blood and the scratching, and like you have a bio field, you can see like blood type things, and then you have a mechanical field, so you can see electric like items that might be of interest to you. So you've got this kind of double combo going on where you have 2 different ways of seeing the world. Those you can like analyze things, put together clues, but ultimately the sort of big ending part of each section is that you jack into the brain of the person in front of you. So then you go inside their brain, and that's where it gets like it said, super crazy, like mind-fuckingly crazy. So if you are a fan of like mind-bending movies and stuff, this is totally going to be up your alley. After the first person that I was in their brain, they were a junkie, so as you can imagine, it was a pretty disturbing, and a wife beater, pretty disturbing experience being inside the brain of that person. But like all the reality is distorted. They keep messing with you, like you're going up an alley and it lasts forever, or like you go this way and suddenly it's behind you, you go that way, suddenly it's behind you again, and you're just like, it just totally messes with you. And then the one that I just got out of her brain was actually a dead girl, and they were like, you know, they wouldn't let him do it. Like the robot, when he tried to plug in, said, oh no, this is we don't do necro, you know, searching or whatever, and he's like, override, and goes in anyway. So he's like in this dying girl's brain. So then there's like extra, like there's like shadow following you, and like there's lots of running and hiding, and it's
more psychological horror. It sounds like no jump scare at all.
No,
really.
There's no jump scares that I was aware of. It's all psychological, fuck with your head. Like, you know, there's elements to it of puzzle that are just trial and error. Like there's one area of the dead girl's brain where there's like 3 entrances, and there's a TV in the corner, and if you don't pay attention to a small detail like this little TV, which you don't really think about because you've been past a million of them in the game so far, you can see which door it wants you to exit on the TV. But if you don't notice it, you're just going to keep going round and round forever. Like it just puts you right back in that room or right back to a different area. So you have to like look at the TV, find the way it wants you to leave that way, and then you'll notice the TV's changed in that room. So then you have to see, okay, what's the puzzle on the TV now? Okay, now I'm going this way to get out of the labyrinth. So it is really like you do have to really observe your environment and really tune into everything.
Is that why it's called Observer?
I guess so. But yeah, so stunning atmosphere, like absolutely feels like, you know, future dystopia, like, you know, beautiful for like cyberpunk stuff. If you like Android stuff, if you like Blade Runner, if you like Deus Ex, that type of thing. But even like the small touches, like they have like digital signboards up, like advertisements, and if you stare at one for too long, it'll like lose its facade and it'll like show some crazy shit instead. And so it does fuck with you quite a lot.
Do you know what the price is on it?
It's $30.
$30.
Yeah, it was on sale when it first came out. I don't believe it's still on.
Yeah, I don't think it is
sale,
either.
But yeah, it was $30, and yeah, I mean, it was just a really good time, honestly. If you like story-driven narrative, if you like cyberpunk or steampunk or anything like Outrun, 80s, Neon, Blade Runner, that kind of stuff, super interesting game. It is scary, but only in the sense that it is purposely trying to fuck with your head. So, like, it's not like there's things that just jump out at you or whatever. It's mostly just, like, having to survive these crazy environments, and it is so beautifully put together. The graphics are incredible. So, yeah, I had a great time with it. Really enjoyed it. Really recommend it. I think at that price point, very happy. I have not finished it yet, so I know that it's good because I've been playing for a good couple hours and still nowhere near the end. In fact, I barely feel like I've scratched the surface, to be honest. But yeah, lovable characters, great game. It almost feels more like a Bethesda game as you're going around, like when you're talking to people, because you can select, like, pick things up and open drawers and things like that. So yeah, really
on all
game.
Platforms.
I believe so.
No, I'm saying it's all on all platforms.
Yes.
I looked it up to verify that is indeed. It's on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Microsoft Windows, and Linux. So if you're a Mac person like us, you can play it as well.
It's hard to search for because the way that the developers spell the game is like there's like an underscore, then it's like there's like it's like a 0 or something, and then observer, and then an underscore, and it's like they do it all weird, and a lot of
stylized as caret all capitals Observer _
Yeah, so when you see that,
Just search
searching for that
Observer
is
game.
hard because there's a lot of things that don't allow that formatting, YouTube being one of them. So when I tried to put the gameplay up and I was tagging it with that, it was like, nope, you can't use that shit.
Yeah.
So just search Observer. Ooh, sorry.
don't punch it.
Just search Observer and
or
go
Observer
from there.
game.
Yeah,
Because
or
Observer
game.
brought up. I googled real quick to make sure we had all platforms.
I mean, it is a
here.
pretty generic
and
name.
it brought up newspaper.
Yeah, Observer game. Really, really good title. Blooper did a great job, and I have nothing but praise for it, honestly. It was my type of game.
There we go.
Yeah.
So final detail number 3, which is where we do a discussion topic.
Another one.
Another one for this episode. This discussion, though, is it kind of sparked from, as you know, I watched a lot of Kind of Funny. They had a discussion the other day of kind of rehashing things for Sonic Mania. So Sonic Mania is a rehash of the original Sonic 1, 2, and a little bit of Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic 3, Sonic and Knuckles. So the question is, are there any original ideas in gaming, or are we just iterating on what we know? And that includes gameplay, story, whatever it may be. You can pick whatever you want. I will put a disclaimer. I don't want to include VR because I would say VR would be the obvious choice of yes, that is something different because it is a new piece of hardware. I'm talking just if you own just a
Plain old console.
yeah, you own a console or you own a PC, non-VR unit. Are we doing the same thing over and over again and just making them look prettier and making things bigger?
Great question.
Go.
You
go
want me to
first.
start?
You go
I
first.
feel like I started the last time.
I can give you my
I want to hear your thoughts because that way I know like
what to argue.
whether I want to argue with you or not.
So my thoughts are no, we are not doing anything new. There are games that have done new ways of doing old things.
New mechanics.
Yes. So a lot of the games are. So I think right now, and the phrase I said to somebody the other day is, gameplay has not changed on console since PS2. And the reason I say that is because we made the 2D to 3D jump. That's why I said. That's why I think VR is the next jump. But we've had 2 generations since then of normal console games. There's no game that is made right now that could not have been made back on the PS2. Granted, it might have been smaller and less high fidelity, but I think gameplay-wise would have been the exact same. And this includes
sequels
and all that
typical
kind of stuff.
genres here.
I'm talking about everything.
You're saying like platformers and
Yeah, nothing's there's nothing. There's no been nothing new that has come out, and I think partially it's because like, what would you do? It is the next obvious question, but I don't know what I would do. But
the game
I feel
is
like
a game is a game. You can only change the mechanics of a game. There's no way to. I mean, that I know of. There's no way to. There has to be a certain set of things. Because we're outside of that now. I know I'm doing like a million thoughts right now, but like when you're thinking about a game, you're thinking about okay, there has to be a goal. There has to be things to do. There has to be an accomplishment. There has to be like an arc, so to speak. But then you look at things like Nor. By TJ, and there's no like the game is just play with your food. It's literally just do that, have fun, and there are games out there that is literally just that. There's no like actual checkpoints. A lot of the walking sims even don't have much of a like. Dear Esther is just literally walking through a poem.
But now you got a bunch of walking sims going on. Like that's the next one.
But walking sims weren't really a thing on previous generations, I guess. I mean,
But you could have done them.
They were a graphical fidelity upgrade, so it was a case of like, okay, now we have the graphics, we can make this pretty game and tell a story.
Yeah.
But the games as art debacle is kind of what this brings to mind for me, is because there are original ideas. It's just that they do end up having to fall into some kind of a previously known category. So, like Shadows of the Colossus, that's the first game that was ever made that I know of where you're in a 3D space and you are only killing bosses. There's no enemies, but it's a small thing. And now you know Cuphead. I don't know if they changed it, but
They added some platform, but originally it was just
it was just killing the bosses, right? So like that's a mechanic, but it doesn't change the overall idea of it's a platforming game or it's a 3D world game or whatever.
I mean, even if it's something as simple as just fucking like, if I were to make a game, a thing I would do in a game is I would make button controller conventions flipped. So most games,
everyone would hate you.
well, no, but it would be part of the game. It would be a mechanic in the game that. As far as I'm sure somebody's done it. I don't say nobody's done it because that's
Stanley
probably
Parable did a lot of that kind of shit.
So it's like, okay, normally you jump with X on PlayStation or A on Xbox or space on keyboard. What if I was like, the Q key is going to be your jump button, which would be the touchpad, and as long as you design the game around that concept, I think you could have a really cool idea, and it would be one of those things where like
It still has to play like a game, though. The input doesn't change the outcome of the game, even if you're just pressing different buttons.
it could though, because it makes the I get it's to me it would, because it makes the gamer think about it.
Undoubtedly make it feel like a different way of playing a game because of the extra effort they have to put into these non-trophy.
It's like when you go back and play GoldenEye.
You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. But that's
still
still a game. You know, it's so it's difficult to say. I mean, there are companies that come out and tell stories, tell games in different manners, like Telltale. Telltale, definitely there are some games previously like that, like King's Quest and things like that. But the Telltale genre is its own genre at this point. It's almost like music in the sense that, you know, just when you think nothing else can be done in that area, there is always a new sound, but it probably still requires guitars. Do you know what I mean? So with the base mechanics of what makes up a game in terms of like the 3D modeling or the 2D modeling or whatever, and the soundtrack and, you know, all like the assets, this, that, and the other, like that core mechanic can't really change because then it's not a game anymore.
What if you combine mechanics in a game? So here's the thought for a game. I'm going to use, because I love psychological stuff. You were talking about being in somebody's brain. You're in somebody's brain. When you're in somebody's brain, it is a mixture as you're going along between a kind of like a platformer style thing where you got to get somewhere.
Already a trope of a game.
Or you've got to go in and it'll switch it up on the fly to where you've just got to point your controller at the screen, or you've got to do.
But there are many games that do that switch genres mid-game. I mean, like Nier Automata does that. Like you go from a top-down like space shooter to a third degree like Transformer thing to an actual hack and slash within fucking 5 minutes in that game. It's like it's all over the place. But there are a lot of genres that don't really work over here too. Like the dating genre is huge in Japan and it's pretty much non-existent here unless it's a Japanese import. So I mean, the only like companies like Quantic Dream, they're always trying to do something new with the idea of a game and how it plays and controls, especially. A lot of their controls are what they deem the person playing to be intuitive to them. Like they should be able to play it without anyone showing them.
The play link is kind of a new concept, but it's not a new concept at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a new way to do a lot of the newer style games.
And my notes here say my opinion was only graphical updates and tweaks, no sweeping changes, and I feel like that's the truth of where we are. That being said, if we do hop into VR, we're gonna acknowledge the elephant in the room. I think VR is the same as jump from 2D to 3D.
Yeah.
Because it's a whole new way to play video games.
I would agree.
It sucks because you have to have a whole new set to do it.
Well, we're still in the process with VR of actually figuring out
how it works.
Well, not only figuring out how it works, but figuring out what a good game in VR is. Because right now, like, everyone has ideas of what would be good in VR. Some of them are hitting and some of them are missing. But
I would love to know what the first few people who made a VR game, like there should be a documentary on this somewhere of like what did they try and what absolutely failed. They're like, I didn't believe that would not work. Because I watched an interview with somebody that I can't remember who it was, but he's like, yeah, the one thing you would think that would work really well in VR is a first-person camera. He's like, you just put the camera on the person's face and you're done. Like you do first-person shooter, you have the camera there and you just make it so their head tracks it. That seems easy and it seems simple, but he goes, then you have the locomotion issue of moving them. How do you get character from point A to point B? And it unlocks this whole other set of events. So
it's definitely more problematic, but those are the challenges that we're overcoming to enable to bring new ideas of what a game is to people. I mean, we just had Spark that released today on Tuesday that we're recording, and Spark is the first V-Sport where like that's the first time anyone's put a game that could actually be an esport in VR, and it's like we officially almost made Tron. But you know what I mean? But without actually being in a weird computer world. Like it's close to it, but you're wearing a headset as opposed to being there. So I would say I don't want to count it out. I don't want to say that there's no way anyone will ever come up with a new genre.
I don't want to say there's no way that
because they always are coming up with new genres.
As of right now, I think
we're stagnant.
I think my statement stands that anything that is made post PS2
without VR
could be without VR. I'm going to put that heavy on there without VR. And I guess technically, if you look at Nintendo, the Wii with the motion controls changed some things.
Yeah, but they were still just games.
They were
You know.
But if you look at if anything post PS2 could easily anything made now could be played on PS2, just less graphical and a lot smaller.
Yeah,
is my argument there.
Yeah, I mean the question is though, like what could they do? I mean, you're basically asking someone to invent a new style of game, but games have to be games. They have to have an element of.
Who says they have to be games though? Like that's what I'm saying. Like with Mario, when Mario 64 came out, Mario 64 took the element of Mario itself. When you hear Mario for the SNES and for the NES, you think of a 2D side-scrolling platformer. Well, Mario went from a 2D side-scrolling platformer to a 3D game, and now majority of the Mario games are 3D.
Yeah, but we can't.
That is changing a genre.
How do you get past 3D?
That's what I'm saying. That's
the only way is to do VR. Like that's the only way to do it because there's no, except for like those cinemas that say it, there's no 4D technically unless you want to add smells or whatever stupid shit.
Have a mouse going to your button.
But you know, like you can at this point. All you can do is improve upon it and make it more lifelike and realistic. There's nothing else to do there. Like, games have to always have... Like, Mario 3D is still Mario 2D, just in a different angle, just different camera angle and a different...
I would disagree, because I feel like...
It opens up more.
Yeah, there's a lot more you can do just because.
Yeah, there's a lot more variety to it, but it's still like it's a
platformer.
That's bigger, better, stronger. Like you could have more variety to a sequel for Mario, just the same way you could have it if you changed it up into 3D or like a Mario knockoff or whatever, like Dr. Mario or whatever.
Yeah,
but because Dr. Mario is a brand new way of playing Mario, but it's
still a puzzle game.
Yeah,
so it's an existing genre with new skin.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's an interesting point. I don't think anyone necessarily wants anything more than what we have, just better. Because, like, I mean, as far as, VR out of the argument, because that's a whole other kettle of fish. But,
yeah.
As far as the console
saying that,
stuff
make sure
goes,
somebody's like, fucking VR!
Yeah, but as far as the consoles go, like, I think all any gamer ever really wants is a fine-tuning of what's working.
I disagree, because at some point you're going to get bored of it.
I don't think you can.
Oh, so the argument I was making before we started recording is I think there's too many 8-bit, 16-bit platformers out there because you're like, oh, the people are pulling on nostalgia. Yeah, but you can still have too many of them. You have oversaturation. It's the fatigue. We're right now
but
with
not anyone can do a AAA FPS game, and a lot of people can do a 2D sprite platformer in their bedroom.
Assassin's Creed, AAA exploration game,
sandbox game.
Yes, franchise fatigue is a thing.
Yeah.
At some point,
that franchise.
At some point,
that doesn't mean that every sandbox game.
At some point, we're going to get from franchise fatigue, we're going to get to genre fatigue, where there's going to be too many of that style of game. I think right now, like the complaint last year was, why is every game open world? There was open world fatigue that was starting to show, and people were like, what? Like they were great games. Metal Gear Solid 5 was great. Witcher 3 was great. They're great games. But every game was that because you can do it, and I feel like it's like, why are we doing this? GTA 5, like...
Well, it's like fashion, isn't it? It goes in cycles. You know what I mean? Like, these pixel games were obviously popular when that was the only available thing to do, and now
it's pushing technology.
Because indie developers can make those games easily, and the nostalgia, factor adding in, they're doing it again because people are wanting that feeling again. Yes, they're going to hit a point where that becomes oversaturized, much the same as like we'll reach a point where wearing 80s shit is oversaturized, and then there's going to be a new style of game which takes over as the most prevalent. Like FPSs will always be prevalent regardless.
It's like 3D platformers they never really made a comeback. They came back for 2 games and kind of disappeared.
They could. I don't think they easily come back and do it.
I don't think they will. Based on the reception from Ratchet & Clank. Well, Ratchet & Clank was received pretty well, but I don't think it's
But again, it could be that one key mechanic or key feature or key graphical upgrade that brings someone back in. Like Moss right now, again, it's in VR, but Moss is looking incredible for bringing back that genre.
Yeah,
everyone that's played it says it's like a Studio Ghibli film in VR.
Yeah.
So, I completely understand with the genre fatigue, but I think they're just going to keep going in circles because
I think they will too. But that's what I'm saying.
That's just how the world works. They copy what is successful.
I would love for something to be just pull out of left field and be like, "Hey, check this shit out," because we all love those kind of surprises, and I think that's what VR was.
Kojima can do it.
I mean, I don't think I don't think so because I think he sticks to traditional game conventions, but he just puts a twist on those traditional
conventions. He created a lot of traditional game conventions, to be fair. But
what do you guys think? I would love to know your guys' opinion on this. Do you think gaming conventions have not conventions, but like gaming mechanics have changed at all in the last 2 console generations or on PC? I don't play as much on PC, so I can't vouch for keyboard mouse. But WASD,
I think they have a more spectacularly unique library than console libraries do.
Yeah.
Because literally, like you said, anyone can make a fucking game.
So I'd love to know what you guys think on that. Do you think what would you do if you could come up with a game that would be different? How would you make it different? Or can you think of one? Because we really can't think of anything that's like because obviously that's the follow up question. Like, what the fuck do you do?
What is
I don't
next?
know.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
next?
VR, which is the big one. So I'm hoping that'll be there.
And that's only again because it's such a leap in.
But even right now, VR games are based on games we already know.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things.
But yeah, a lot of them.
Majority of them.
I don't think you'd play Job Simulator in flat. I mean, you could, but
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's possible to do so.
yeah.
So, love to know what you guys know. This is Indie Please Add Details, your weekly dive into the indie world, indie developers, and news and discussions. Apparently, 2 discussions today because that's what we do. If you want to follow us offline or online after the show, follow us on Twitter at Love2GamersSTL or on Discord. Link should be down in the description. If I forgot, remind me and I'll put it down there because I meant to do it last night.
And also, let us know how you're feeling about this show because this is a new show for us. We're on
episode 3
that we wanted to do a more indie a more indie nuanced show because we enjoy them so much and because we really do want to help these developers shine. So like it's a big part of the mission for us for kind of giving back to that community, but also playing on the game field which we think we're comfortable with because A, we're both huge fans, and B, as we always say, we're indie media, we want to support indie games. So how is it going? Is it okay? Is there anything we could add to this that you think would make it better?
Change?
Feedback on parts you don't like? Like, we can take it. We're big boys.
What do you think? I'm a wee boy.
Fair enough. But, that's Indie Please Add Details,
Episode
number 3. And we'll see you next week with more Indie Please Add Details. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. And as always,
welcome to the second level. Bye.
It ain't no game, but they saying welcome to the second level.